Hey there, story lovers. Welcome to Wingman Joker, where every story comes to life. Dive into captivating tales that will thrill, inspire, and entertain. If you enjoy the journey, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to join the adventure. Chapter 21. This place. It was all a haze for a moment. Then the blurriness started to fade, and the pain came. It felt like someone was pinching Aurelius on the area between his navel and hip, as well as on the area between his index and middle finger of his left hand. Despite the pain, Aurelius pushed his upper body back towards the wall behind his bed. His neck was awfully tight, but he had no energy to give it a good crack. He simply moved his eyes around. He looked at his own miserable condition first. His waist and hand were wrapped in bandages, and he had bruises in places he didn't remember being hit on. His wrist was also of an unpleasant, greenish color. He remembered thinking it was sprained the first time he hit the commander. He wasn't sure what it was, but it didn't look good or feel good. Then he looked to his sides. He lay on the other half of a large bed in an unfamiliar room of comfortable size. All of it seemed to have been built out of wooden planks of different textures and shades. What caught his attention was that on the other side of the bed lay an abused blanket. Somebody had been sleeping right beside him. He looked at the nightstand beside the other side of the bed. His notebook was there, his precious gray notebook that could do no wrong. Why was it out of his bag? Finally, his gaze traveled to his companion. Kate was sitting on the windowsill in thin clothing, her legs curled up against her chest. Just then, the sound of raindrops revealed itself to Aurelius. He hadn't heard them before, but they'd been there the whole time. Aurelius hadn't been hearing the world, but it had been there, talking to him. Now he was listening. Kate hadn't seemed to notice Aurelius waking up yet. No, of course she had. She just chose to hold her hand against the window and watch as the drops of rain raced down the window. Aurelius stayed quiet. Was he supposed to greet her, thank her, curse her, or what was it? Aurelius didn't feel like saying it, whatever he was going to say. He just watched Kate. Her figure was still. She looked so peaceful. It was as if she was untethered from the world. Nothing could touch her, but she couldn't touch anything. It was sad in a way, but so beautiful. Aurelius noticed that her hair had grown. As he looked at her at that moment, he couldn't believe she would ever hurt a person. Perhaps that was what people thought when they looked at him as well. He looked at his right hand. Those people would be wrong now. He was no longer what people saw outside. He couldn't claim to be. His existence had become something of an unintentional lie. He looked back at Kate. Her eyes had turned. They were pointed directly at him in his sorry frame. She really looked different. Aurelius wondered how long it had been. It couldn't have been more than a few days. Suddenly, he faintly remembered waking up on their way back from the Borlo mansion. He had cried for her to let go and even hit her as she carried him before he quickly tired out and lost consciousness again. However, there was no judgment in Kate's eyes. Her eyes seemed to be lighter. They were always so dark while they were out, but as the window reflected light into them, a silver flow appeared. He had the urge to hug her, but he remembered that the world wasn't his servant. Kate wasn't his caretaker. She had her own issues and didn't exist to bother herself with Aurelius' troubles. He had no right to push it onto others, so he didn't. He just clenched his hands into fists around his blanket. "How do you feel?" Kate asked, leaning back against the wall beside the windowsill. Aurelius began before stopping to breathe. Then his shoulders dropped. He trembled slightly, holding back vomit. "Why are we here, Kate?" Kate's thin eyebrows tilted slightly as she pulled them down. "Why are we in this inn?" "No." Aurelius shook his head slightly before uttering with a fluctuating voice, "Why are we here in this world, doing what we are doing?" Aurelius looked at the planks on the roof. "Why should we? I keep going. We are supposed to," Kate said with a light knock on the window. Aurelius looked at her. She looked away. "We are strong and gifted, and all the things that tie us to duty. We have to do it. We are supposed to do it. You know, one is lucky if they get to be without the choice of, what am I going to do with my life? I and you have it right under our noses. Do everything in your power to make the world better, it says. Other people can't do as much as us, and they really like using that fact as reasoning as to why all the work should be left to us. They are right, can't say they aren't, but I made up my mind long ago. I don't need duty. I made a promise to myself to protect the beauty in this world. That's why I keep going. It's the same for you, isn't it? A hero." Aurelius chuckled. The chuckle turned to a cough. Once that was over, he laid down again. "Gabriel asked me what I wanted to be, how I wanted to live. I told him I would be a hero. I would help everybody, make the good prosper, and make the bad into good. You were always going to fail if it's something like that. Aurelius looked down at his hand and pressed on the wound behind the bandages. I guess so. You protect the good without caring for the bad. Maybe I should too, but I want everybody to be what they can be at their best. The world could be so good. The world could be, but it isn't, and it won't be, Kate said with a sigh. Until you accept that reality, you won't be able to achieve anything. The steps your ideal world requires are steps that no human society can take, especially not this one. And besides, people will always seek conflict. Negativity is present everywhere. Give a man paradise, and the first thing he'll do is complain. Better to focus on preserving the good than on changing the bad. It's really all that we can do with the power we have. Aurelius stretched his body to grab his notebook from the side. You read my notebook? He asked after getting his hands on the thing and returning to his original position. I'm sorry, Kate said and lowered her head slightly. I let my curiosity get the best of me. Aurelius tapped his fingers on the notebook's gray leather cover. You could have put it back, and I wouldn't have known. I know. I don't blame you, Aurelius said, opening the notebook. Though I am a bit embarrassed, he said with a slight smile that didn't match his sorrowful eyes that pointed to the first page of the notebook. On the page, it read, "The world is yours," in all capital letters. The letters were made up of a bunch of messy lines drawn with a heavy hand, and the text went diagonally from the upper left corner to the lower right corner. I don't think it's embarrassing, Kate said softly as she turned and hung her legs off the windowsill. Aurelius snorted quietly and flipped through some pages before finding the quote he was looking for. Then he read it out loud. Some animals in this world only seek to destroy. And not for the sake of their survival, but just for their entertainment. Those types of animals are okay to kill since it makes the world a better place. After he finished, he looked at Cade, who still sat on the windowsill with a complex expression. It seemed she was tensely waiting for Aurelius to tell her his thoughts. He proceeded to do so. We were hunting when he said that. I wrote it in my notebook later that day, according to memory. I don't think I forgot anything, but I wish I did. Gabriel was in the Zalfarian elite troop. He must have killed hundreds, if not thousands. What I wrote must have been his rationale when it came to killing. Aurelius spilled his thoughts, and a glint appeared at the bottom of his eyes. He turned his gaze away from the eyes of Cade, looking up at the roof instead. I thought it was okay for me to kill, too. I thought it wouldn't be that bad. But it is. It's horrible. I put my bare hand through a man's chest. I practically ripped out his heart. Or his soul, and life just went away. At that moment, it didn't matter if he was good or bad. I could do that to him regardless. I could kill anyone, good or bad. How can it be right for me to have such power? The guy also wasn't all bad. He had a family. He had love in his life. Possibly more than I do. He was a murderer for sure, though, so maybe I did make the world a better place. But what does that matter? Cade stood up and stepped closer. It does matter. You may be a murderer now, and because of that, you may feel like you can't be what you want to be anymore. But you can. You can be a hero. As Balgair said, a hero isn't someone who is perfectly in tune with upright ideals, but someone who is capable of letting go of those ideals in order to change the world for the better. And that's what you have done. Aurelius looked at Cade with his eyelids lowered. Everything is a mistake, he said, before he put his hand on the page where the quote was and ripped it off. I'm done. He crumpled up the page and threw it at Cade before turning his back and wrapping himself in his warm blanket. Chapter 22, Bounty. Balgair sat against a tree with a large bag filled with banknotes on his side. His head was still throbbing from the commander's kick. He looked at the bag of money and sighed. He could just walk away now. Cade would maybe hunt him down. And maybe she wouldn't. Balgair wasn't sure if she had the connections and skills for something like that. But still, I guess I'll go, he thought. He still had that one thing to accomplish, after all. He's at your friend's place? Balgair asked, his face twisting in a dumbfounded manner. Didn't know you had friends. Ha ha, Cade laughed very loudly because Balgair was very funny. Balgair sighed and looked around. Well, are we going to go somewhere else to talk? Under this bridge is fine. I don't suppose there's a better place either, Cade answered. Balgair lifted a finger as he was about to open his mouth. Cade interrupted before he even managed to get a word out. No, we're not going to your bar again. It's morning, for God's sake. You're really not thinking about drinking this early. Are you even old enough to drink? Hey, I'm at least Aurelius, age, Balgair blurted out defensively. Yeah, whatever, Kate said with a shake of her head. You got the banknotes. Balgair nodded and took off the bag on his shoulder before handing it to Cade. There was 3,000 gold in that safe. My 5% cut makes it 2,850. Cade looked inside the bag. Shit, it's not enough. After I spread 500 to those in need, it'll be even less. We can't do much to further our plan with just 2,350 gold. Then she looked up at Balgair and asked, You sure you didn't swipe any extra for yourself? Balgair raised his hands high. Hey, 150 gold is plenty for a street rat like myself. Besides, if I wanted to steal from you, I wouldn't have brought you the money. Cade nodded and put the bag on her shoulder. I guess this is farewell. It hasn't been a pleasure, but you're not the worst of them. As she was about to turn, Balgair yelled, Wait. She looked at him and widened her eyes, prompting him to speak. How is Aurelius? Why are you acting like you care? Cade asked with a tilt of her head. Hey, he kind of saved my life. Of course, I'm grateful, Balgair said, as if insulted. I'm not an asshole. Cade looked to her sides before stating the obvious. You are, though. Oh fine. Still, I do care. And I know Aurelius is probably pretty shit right now. So, can I see him? Thank him or whatnot? Cade exhaled. It would probably make him feel better. She then clicked her tongue, and answered, Yeah, sure. Aurelius woke up after midday. He was hungry, but didn't feel like eating. He didn't have the energy to get up either way. He was once again at the home of Cade's unknown friend. The inn had just been a place to crash for the night on their travels. For hours after waking, he just stared at the roof, at his body, and out of the window, but he wasn't really looking. He wasn't really thinking, either. He didn't even care to swipe away his disheveled hair that was irritating his eyes. He was in somewhat of a limbo state. Then his senses were greeted with some new stimulation when he heard the door being unlocked downstairs. He turned his head to the left, looking out of the open door, where the sound came from. Aurelius, are you awake? Cade's voice came into Aurelius' ears. Aurelius grumbled as he turned his body slightly towards the door before answering, Yeah, what is it? Cade noticed Aurelius' sunken cheeks and frowned. Have you eaten anything? Aurelius stayed quiet. It had been days. He would starve himself to death at this rate. Cade sighed. Balgair's here, Cade said as the sounds of stairs being climbed started to echo. Why? There was no answer before Balgair's face was revealed to Aurelius as he entered the second floor and started heading into his room. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? Aurelius asked as Cade and Balgair entered the room. Yeah, for saving my life. For killing the commander, you mean? Balgair exhaled a dissatisfied breath. Aurelius frowned. Well, you came here to thank me. Now you've thanked me. You're free to leave. You weren't supposed to help us further than this in the first place. Balgair looked at Cade and said quietly, Could you give us the room? Cade looked at Aurelius before nodding and leaving the room, shutting the door in the process. Balgair looked around for a place to sit before simply leaning his back against the wall. Aurelius tilted his head. So, what more is there to discuss? Balgair reached for his pocket. The one he kept his cigarettes in. But he quickly retracted his hand and sighed. Look, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I know I'm an asshole. Do you? Yes, but it's not like I want to be. Shitty people are shitty people because of shitty people. And I've known nothing but shitty people all my life. Balgair looked down at his hand as he popped his knuckles with his thumb, pushing each of his other fingers down in their turn. I grew up in the slums as an orphan. Slums far worse than the ones you've seen. The streets can get much dirtier than you can imagine. You probably saw some puddles of piss and even some feces lying around during your time in the slums. But when I was a child, it was a regular occurrence to have a few liters of blood mixed in those puddles. It wasn't all that unusual to have guts lay on the streets or find dead bodies in random alleys. Balgair breathed deeply and wagged his finger with a comic undertone. Now, crime happens everywhere, but in the slums, it isn't crime. There are no real laws. Nobody gives a shit. Everybody just hates everybody while looking out for themselves. Aurelius listened with his gaze downcast and his lips tightly sealed. There was a moment of silence where nobody said anything. Then Balgair chuckled. It's a cruel world we live in, ain't it? Balgair said. Terrible, terrible stuff. Crime is a horrible thing, and the first chance I got, I became a part of it. Balgair walked up to the only window in the room and gazed out, where only a forest was in sight. This house was paid for with dirty money. I can smell it. I've always been able to smell it. And that smell is on more things in this world than it is not. That says a lot. So, anyway, I started teaching myself all kinds of stuff. I learned how to cheat, lie, steal, and, most of all, kill. I was often surrounded by people, but I was always alone. I didn't see a use for others, and I really just despised everyone. That, of course, led to conflict. I won't go into detail, but I ran. I just didn't want any part of it anymore. Not because of the constant violence or any other reasoning concerning that morality stuff. Just didn't think it was worth it. Chose to just waste away somewhere else while I lived a miserable life, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Hasn't been long, but I was starting to grow tired of it. Weren't you supposed to be here to thank me? Why are you telling me this? Valgair turned and scratched his head with realization. Oh, right, I'm kind of a shit storyteller. My bad. What I'm trying to say is that this world is shit. It's pure and utter filth in every meaning of the word. And I am part of that filth. That commander was a part of that filth, too. You're not. Valgair leaned back and put his hands on the windowsill. I know you want to be a hero. I know you think you have this great responsibility to save people. Maybe you do, but the way you're going about it won't work. You can't try to save people who don't want to be saved. The world appreciates authenticity, so you better give authenticity to it. Be clear about who to protect and who to eliminate. Learn to draw a line. I can draw that line for you this time and say that no matter how many Father's Day cards that piece of shit commander gets, he is still the same filth that kills with no remorse. He should have died, and you killed him. It was a good first kill. I'd swap first kills with you in a heartbeat, that's for sure. Fuck that, Aurelius spat. How can you draw the line? For a moment, Valgair was startled by Aurelius cursing, but quickly formed a counter-argument. I can draw the line because I see clearly. A loving daughter doesn't resurrect the hundreds of people the commander probably slaughtered during his life. What I also see clearly is a little wannabe hero sulking because his hands got a little dirty. Valgair exhaled and brought his hands forward to help punctuate his point. What you did maybe wasn't according to your morals, but that just means your morals are shit. What you did was right. Everybody knows it. Even you probably do, but you'd rather give up than let your morals evolve. But if you're truly interested in helping people, you have to evolve, Valgair said, and in the same way, there was a sound of the front door opening again. Aurelius paid no mind to that, however, as Valgair posed the real question. So what will you do? Act depressed and waste away, or evolve and become someone capable of changing millions of lives for the better? What's with the speech? Since when do you care about millions of lives? Sorry, it's just, I've seen so much filth that I've become able to see it with my eyes closed, so trust me when I say this. You're not filth, Aurelius. You're right about me not caring about millions. I have barely enough to care for myself, but I don't hate you, and I don't want you to be depressed over stupid shit. Finally, Aurelius' deep frown got a bit less deep. Depressed over stupid, he said under his breath. Then he looked Valgair in the eyes. Thanks for coming, Valgair, but will this be our last conversation? Valgair smiled. No, I don't think so. Well, it depends on whether you'll have me. I'd like to continue being a part of this group. Aurelius smiled slightly. The door opened, and Cade walked in with a young woman with silky, slightly curled brown hair. The woman wore neat, round glasses and had freckles on her cheeks that blended smoothly with her tan skin. She also possessed a row of white teeth, which she seemed eager to show off. That was until she saw Aurelius. Aurelius, this is Aaliyah. She's the one who owns this place, Cade said, gesturing to Aaliyah. Aaliyah, this is Aurelius, he's been my traveling companion for a few weeks now. Cade gestured toward Aurelius. What have you done, Cade? Aaliyah asked as her shoulders dropped. Huh, what do you mean? Cade asked with furrowed brows. You don't know. Aaliyah gulped before answering with a severe tone, your companion is wanted by Newman. There's 1,000 gold on his head. Chapter 23, A Golden Target. Minuscule stone bits broke away and fell down 100 meters as Gadriel walked on the large, rough stones that lied on the edge of the former royal castle's balcony. Gadriel sighed and looked at Sheridan, who was a few tens of meters from him, sitting with her legs crossed and watching with a cup of tea in hand. This would be a bit more fun if you weren't here. The pale woman with fair facial features glanced at the small round table on her side, where her pure white mask lay. You afraid I'll save you if you fall? It would be a little anticlimactic if I fell, and you swooped in to save me. Gadriel put one foot over the edge, balancing on one foot while keeping his gaze on Sheridan. Takes away all the thrill. Don't worry, Sheridan said, a smirk appearing on her face, I won't save you. I'm just here to watch. Gadriel smiled back before looking down. There was someone running at the main entrance. Gadriel smiled. He recognized the man. Don't disappoint me, Heel, Gadriel thought as he stepped over the edge completely and started to plummet towards the ground like a rocket. He maneuvered his body in the air, his clothes flapping wildly in the process. He didn't care to use any essence, so it was a bit of a chilly experience. When he was just 10 meters from the ground, however, reinforcement and enhancement snapped on, and an ethereal spike appeared in his hand. He shoved the spike into the wall of the castle and slowed himself down just enough to meet the ground gently. Hello, Heel, he greeted the startled young man, who wore a Western-style hat that he liked to hold on to at all times. It was possible that it was just a habit that came out when he was nervous. Gadriel would have needed to get a spy on him to know. What do you have for me there? He asked, pointing at the rolled-up piece of paper in Keel's hand. Ah, here, Keel said, bowing and handing the paper to Gadriel, who quickly rolled it open. It's a, Keel started, only to be startled by the sudden appearance of Sheridan with her mask on. A wanted poster. Yeah, I can see that, Gadriel remarked. Yes, of course, Keel said with a forced smile. Gadriel looked up from the poster before having looked it over completely. Well, anything else? Keel took his hat off and started rotating it in his hands. Ah, yes, the Borlos were robbed. That person is supposed to be the main culprit. Sir Borlo hashed out a deal with the manager of the Newman branch in Borea despite their earlier disagreements, so now Newman has taken the search for the culprit into their hands. About the sketch, there is none because he was wearing a mask and nobody saw his face. Keel, Gadriel said slowly as he rubbed his forehead, I pay you to keep a lookout for interesting things in the world and report about them to me, so if the next sentence that comes out of your mouth doesn't communicate to me the reason why I should give a shit about this thing you brought to me just now, I will carve out your insides. After Gadriel was done articulating his thoughts, he put on a soft smile and uttered a simple word in the Arcric language, sake. Keel's lips quivered as he stumbled back a bit and accidentally let go of his hat. He picked it up and answered Gadriel's question, yes, I understand. Look at the description, please. Gadriel tilted his head slightly and brought the paper up to read it out loud. Approximated height around 190 centimeters. Proficient essence user with no noticeable weaknesses. Approximated age around 20 to 30 years old. Blue eyes. Gadriel paused and looked at Keel with a devilish grin, scaring the fidgeting man motionless. He then looked to Sheridan. Even she seemed to shrink back slightly at seeing his expression. He looked back at the paper and read the interesting part out loud. Golden hair. A few days later, Gadriel arrived at a club located in the busy center of Borea. He walked into the establishment alone. The multicolored lights illuminated his black dress shirt, his gray slacks and most of all, his gold and diamond earrings, which he had put on just for this special occasion. He didn't actually like wearing the things, but he had to look the part, didn't he? He looked around with round, edgeless sunglasses on. It was hard to see, but at least his hair was slicked back out of the way of his vision. Once he saw what he was looking for, he slithered through the mass of people without getting touched and made it to the door beside the counter. Gadriel knocked on the steel door a couple of times before a hatch at eye level was opened. Entry code, the one behind the door asked. Gadriel removed his sunglasses and gazed into the man's eyes. I don't know your code, but I'm here to talk to your boss. Felix, was it? Hurry up and let me in before I kick this hunk of steel into your face. The man behind the door hesitated for a moment before he shut the hatch. Then the door clicked, and Gadriel opened it. Gadriel walked in and shut the door before digging at his ear. Then he glanced at the doorman, who seemed to have his hands half raised in front of him. He shook his head and began walking down the hall with multiple hazy glass doors on the sides. The doorman's voice came from behind. Who are you? Gadriel dug at his teeth with his tongue briefly before turning back slightly and raising a finger. I am the one you don't ask questions from. He then strode straight forward and entered the room at the end of the hall. A lively conversation died in an instant as Gadriel strode in. Gadriel, however, was pleasantly surprised to see a somewhat familiar face there. He had seen the man once or twice before, but he didn't make a habit of paying attention to things at random. I assume you're Felix, Gadriel said as he looked at one of the 4 people in the room. The man looked to be nearing his 40s and didn't look to be taking it well. He had thin brown hair and was clean-shaven, most likely in a desperate effort to look younger. It didn't really work, but the effort was commendable at least. As his only redeeming quality, he had a fairly toned physique that his shirtlessness showed off. There were a total of 2 men in the room, who both sat on couches, accompanied by 2 half-naked young women. The couches had a glass table between them with 2 opium pipes on it. There was a work desk at the back of the room with a spinning chair behind it. Nobody was actually sitting on the chair. Seems like they're having fun, Gadriel thought as he waited. Noticing that nobody was doing anything, he looked around at the other man and the 2 girls, raising his eyelids. "You have 3 seconds to get out," he said, nodding to the side. In that instant, everybody except Felix scuttled out. Gadriel walked towards the couch opposite Felix and then by it all the way to the desk at the back of the room. He made the chair stop and sat down on it, throwing his feet onto the desk before finally breaking the silence. "Can you talk?" he asked Felix, who had stood up without purpose and was standing in the middle of the room miserably with his shoulders hunched. It was unclear if he was experimenting with an extended bow. Felix gulped. "What? I am asking if your moron brain is able to form coherent sentences after you've pumped it full of drugs, or has my visit here been in vain?" Gadriel said while he kicked down things on the desk to fit his feet on it. "Oh, yeah, I'm good. I'm not high. Maybe a little, but I'm sorry, I didn't get your visitation announcement." Felix stumbled through his words with as much grace as a 7-year-old. "That's because I didn't send one." Felix opened his mouth once or twice without a word coming out before asking, "May I ask why?" "Because I don't need to," Gadriel answered with a flick of his wrist. "Newman is my family. I'm kind of like a father to all my dear branch managers. Especially those who supported me during the overtaking. So tell me, does a parent need to send a letter before coming to visit his child?" "No, sir," Felix said with a bow. "Thank you for coming. I am happy to see you." "Happy to hear it." Gadriel put on a wide smile with his eyes squinted so that it looked like there was only darkness in his eyes. Then his expression went straight, and he pointed at the couch. "Now put your shirt on, sit down, and give me all the information you have on this golden-haired robber you're after." Felix nodded and put his shirt on before sitting down. Where should I start?" Chapter 24. The Emperor and the Retiree. A few hours after dawn in the great Zalfarian Empire, a wooden carriage arrived at the gates of a large yellowish mansion in the woods. The guards at the gate stopped the carriage at once and demanded that it be turned around. No appointment had been made. The one in the carriage knew that. He jumped out, his long golden hair obstructing his sight. He swiped it to the left, away from his blue eyes, and threw a friendly smile at the guards. "Hello, gentlemen. Fine morning." The guards were both startled, but recovered from the shock quickly and bowed deeply. "Yes, Your Majesty," they said in sync. Alexander waved a hand. "No need to be so tense. Act as if I'm not here." "Ah, I'll open the gate right away, Your Majesty," the older one of the guards said, running to the side. "Don't bother," Alexander said, and he jumped over the gate, his white and gold robes fluttering in the process. He landed lightly on his feet on the other side of the gate and immediately began striding toward the mansion. In front of the mansion, there was a set of stairs that led to a platform that had 2 sets of stairs on its sides. After he climbed those stairs, he came to the mansion's entrance, and as he was about to open the door, 2 children with completely different hair colors came rushing out. They noticed Alexander and quit running around. One of them pointed at him. "Hey, you're his Emperorness." Alexander chuckled. "Gabriel's told you about me. He talks about you all the time," the other one of the children said. Alexander smiled and asked, "Where is Gabriel now?" "He's on the balcony. We can lead you there," the child answered and ran back inside. Alexander followed after him onto the 2nd floor and into a smallish balcony with only a couple of chairs and a round table. He wasn't there to see the chairs or the balcony, though. He was there to see his dirty blonde-haired, one-eyed friend. Gabriel turned as he heard them approach, revealing his only working bluish-green eye. "To what do I owe this visit, excuse me?" "Your Emperorness," he said as a lively smile appeared on his face. Alexander laughed. "So it was you who taught them that?" He ruffled the hair of the 2 boys, and said, "Thanks for the help. You can go back and play now." He then looked back at Gabriel and went to sit down. "Good kids you have here. They're fine when there's less than 3 of them," Gabriel said with a warm smile. "When it's all 6 of them, I feel like I'm drowning." "Drowning in affection. The best thing to drown in, I suppose." "I'm happy that you're happy. I'm happy that I'm happy, too." Gabriel sipped his coffee. "No, but seriously, adopting was the best thing that ever happened to me." Alexander let out a soft breath and looked at Gabriel's cup briefly. Does your Emperorness yearn for a cup of coffee? Gabriel asked, pointing at his own cup with an unirascible grin. Alexander looked at the backyard of the mansion, which was filled with trees, bushes, and bright yellow flowers. No, His Majesty doesn't yearn for coffee. He turned to face Gabriel. You know it's, Your Majesty, right? You used to take this stuff so seriously. I'm not in the elite troupe anymore. I'm just an old man nowadays. You're an old man, too, it seems. No longer a prince. A few more years, and you'll have gray hairs popping up. Yeah, I'm starting to get why my father was the way he was. I've only been emperor for a little over 3 years, but it has felt like 30 years. I'm just kidding. You look great. I bet, Her Majesty thinks so, too. I heard she's pregnant again. That she is. 5 months now. But what do you mean again? It's only the second time. Second time means it's happening again, doesn't it? Also, have you thought of any names yet? Don't say Alexander. That would make him the 8th Alexander in the royal family's history, right? It would, but naming him Alexander would make things a bit complex. You remember my firstborn, right? Alexander, the 7th of his name. How do you think that would go? Alexander looked to his side and started acting as if he were addressing his children. Hey, Alexander. Not you, Alexander. You, Alexander. Or no, I was actually talking to myself. Me, Alexander. Gabriel laughed so hard that he barely managed to not spill his coffee into his lap. If it were anyone else, Alexander would have suspected the authenticity of the laughter. Especially when the joke wasn't even really that funny. What's with you royals naming your children the same thing over and over? Gabriel asked. Alexander dug at his ear. I don't know, maybe we're just especially unimaginative folk. It could be that you can't run an empire properly if you have too many ideas. Gabriel exhaled through his nose and sipped his coffee. So, what is it that you came here for? He asked with a serious expression. He knew very well that the emperor had no time to converse with friends just for fun. Right, Alexander said, reaching his hand into the insides of his robes. He wished he could have enjoyed his best friend's company for just a little longer, but it was over now. Take a look at this, he said and handed a poster to Gabriel. A wanted poster. Gabriel eyed the poster before raising his eyes. Aurelius. Alexander nodded. He has left the Thropes, and begun to walk his own path. It seems so, Gabriel said slowly. What will you do about the letter now? I will deliver it to him when the time comes. But that isn't what you came here to hear. So let's get to the point now, Gabriel said. You're here to ask my predictions and counsel on whether you should get involved or not, correct? Alexander nodded. Well, my advice is to do nothing, Gabriel said and handed the poster back. Kendrick is making his preparations to restart the war, and when it starts again, we won't have Ares here to save us. You can't focus on things on the other side of the great ocean. I know, but I'm asking whether it's better to have him fighting Newman alone or fighting Lundkirk with his people. Your father promised Ares that his son would not be involved in the war. That promise comes with the crown. Are you going to break that promise? Alexander buried his face in his hands. No, of course not. But he's already in trouble. If we just ask. Of course he will come if you ask. The boy is the most pure-hearted being in this world that I have ever seen. There's also the fact that Kendrick killed his father and grandfather and is now threatening to kill you as well as your entire bloodline, including him. That just means it involves him already, Alexander said with his arms spread. Perhaps, but his father fought 12 years away from his son because of that promise. He had a reason for that. I understand that he didn't want his son to ever become like him, but we need Aurelius. He isn't ready, Alexander. And he has his own fight going on. He's trying to carve his own path. He wants to help the people of Mercrest, so leave him be. If we really do desperately need him here someday, he will come. Alexander tapped on the round table. What did you tell him? What did you tell Aurelius? I taught him everything he needed to know. Everything needed in the Thropes. Didn't you think he would go out into the world? He will survive with what I taught him, and he'll learn more as he grows. Does he know about Kendrick? Does he know about what the Conqueror of the West did to his family? You expect me to tell that to a child? He has to know. No wonder he's in Mercrest and not here, since you didn't tell him what danger his home is in. Stop it, Gabriel hissed. I understand you want to survive, but don't put it all on Aurelius. It's not his responsibility. I chose to omit information to keep him safe from himself. When he learns that his father and grandfather were both poisoned, he'll be furious and will probably want to go deliver justice to Kendrick right away, but he won't be able to. Not yet. So let him grow in Mercrest. He wants to help the people there, and the people there need help. He's adequate to save Mercrest. Trust me, he's a world changer, and his type doesn't die easily. I'm sorry. Alexander raised his hand with his gaze downcast. You're right, but do you think Mercrest is safe? Aurelius could very well die, despite his strength and potential. Newman's leader is dangerous. Rumors say he took control of Newman 2 years after joining at the age of 18. I've also heard he plans on expanding. Apparently, he wants to destroy Nexus and expand to Arcric before challenging the Conqueror of the West. He's on our side, then, Gabriel said, raising his cup. He's an abstract genius. He's on no side at all. He creates and destroys without any meaning. Alexander scoffed. A maniac is what he is. I guess so, but safety is an illusion. Mercrest may not be safe, but neither is any other place in the world. Some places just feel safer than others, but it's all part of the same mess. Gabriel looked at the flowers in the garden. Besides, if you let him be, he will grow far more capable in Mercrest than he would by training here. Alexander breathed the fresh air radiating from the garden deep into his lungs. He then stood and bowed. Thank you for the advice. As he was about to leave, Gabriel stood as well and embraced him. Thanks for coming to me about this. You're doing well as the Emperor. Just don't become your father. Alexander pulled away and nodded before walking inside from the balcony, a dark expression on his face. I won't break the promise. But please grow strong and help us in this war, Aurelius, son of Ares. Chapter 25. The Beginning of Annihilation. Kate buried her face in her arms as she sat with her back against the guest room's wall. Just how did this happen? How did they find out about his hair? Balgair eyed the wanted poster for the whateverth time. There's no way you're 190 centimeters. 187 max. Can you take this seriously? Cade snapped. Besides, this is all your fault. You should have known the Borlos were associated with Newman. Now it's your problem, too, since you're part of this group, apparently. I know, Balgair said with a wave of his hand. It's already done, though. We may not know what caused it, but does that really matter? You're concentrating on the wrong things. We should just shave his hair or dye it and move on. No harm done. No, we won't do anything to my hair. Aurelius objected. Oh, come on, I get that it's a part of your identity and all, but it's an easy solution. They have no pictures. They only know your hair color. If they don't have that, they've got nothing. It's my father's hair. We won't cut it, dye it, or do anything else to it. I'll wear a hat or something. Balgair sighed. Whatever. Problem solved. No need to panic. Cade's eyes widened. It was the cut in the balaclava. Balgair turned to look at Cade. I remember there being a cut on the side of Aurelius' balaclava. It was small enough to not be noticeable, but large enough to let a few loose hairs fall out if cut, Cade explained. They got the hair from the ground, and since golden hair is so rare, they were able to figure out that it belonged to one of the robbers. Aurelius touched his forehead. I remember. It was the first cut I received. The guard who did it was the only one in the mansion who lived. He can confirm he cut me on the side of the head from where the hair could have fallen. Cade rubbed her eyes. Well, that's that. What now? Now we get Goldilocks a hat, Balgair said. The plan? What about the plan? Will we just cower away and leave it be? Aurelius asked. He shook his head. No, I won't go along with that. I came here for a reason. I will help these people, no matter if there's a bounty on my head. He clenched his jaw, and his nose crunched up. I'll just rid the world of bounty hunters in the process. Let them come. Kate closed her eyes and exhaled. Listen to yourself, Aurelius. That won't do. We can't just stroll around and see how many hopeless people try to kill you. If we're not careful, Newman will track you down and execute you. No man can win a battle against thousands of trained soldiers, no matter how strong. Aurelius glanced at her and then out of the window. You know, we don't have to suffer this with him. If it's so stressful for you, just leave Aurelius to fend for himself, Balgair said to Cade. Cade side-eyed him and snorted. You can go if you want to. I won't abandon a companion due to a bit of trouble. Then Balgair raised his hands. Oh, I'm not leaving. I'm with Aurelius all the way. Let's adapt our plan to this situation. Oh, it's our plan now? Cade asked with a mocking tone. It is. I'm a part of it, regardless of your opinion. Why, you don't want to help the people of Mercrest. You know, I'm starting to think it wouldn't be so bad to do some good for once in my life, Valgair said with a shrug. Kate shook her head, and Aurelius kept quiet. So, Valgair began to elaborate on his idea. So about the adaptation, we can do what Aurelius suggested. It would certainly help with removing bounty hunter scum from the world, but the problem with his plan is that it's stupid as fuck and would get us all killed. So, what is your oh so brilliant adaptation idea? Kate asked. Well, let's start with who issued the bounty, Valgair said. Newman, Kate asked. Valgair wagged a finger. Specifically, the Borea branch of Newman. Wow, big difference, Kate said monotonously. It is a big difference. You see, Newman doesn't operate as a single entity. Each branch oversees a specific area. No branch gets involved with the business affairs of another. So what? Kate asked. Valgair looked to Aurelius, who was completely silent while staring at him. There were thoughts in those eyes. Thoughts unlike the ones he'd had before. Valgair grinned. He was bound to get excited by all the potential. Never before had he liked the universe more. The puzzle came together wonderfully. Things really did go around and come around. So if one branch gets wiped out, the others aren't really concerned. Some necessities may be transferred to other branches. For example, the responsibility of handling business with the houses in the area of the wiped out branch may be given to surrounding branches. You're suggesting we wipe out a Newman branch? Are you insane? Kate asked. And won't bounties be included in necessities? The bounties on the enemies of the branch, maybe. The bounties issued by an outsider in exchange for payment, no chance. But the Borlos are associates, so the bounty on Aurelius is personal for them. Valgair shook his head with a smile. No, they're not. I told you, the Borlos aren't associates. Their house is on the verge of destruction. They won't be around for long, so Newman is just waiting for it to collapse and another to take its place. The head of the Borlos knows this, but he was probably so angry he just had to get revenge. That's why he paid whatever sum he had to get Newman to help with hunting Aurelius down. Aurelius straightened his posture and commented, "You want us to wipe out the Newman branch and get rid of the bounty? That's not personal, just to get another bounty put on us, which will be personal this time." Valgair looked at Aurelius with delight. "Look at you, using your brain and all." He laughed, then got serious. "No, but you're on the right track. There's just one thing you got wrong." He raised a finger. "We won't be the ones wiping them out." Kate furrowed her brows and scoffed. "You think you can get someone else to do it? There's nobody that wants trouble with Newman." "Oh, sorry, let me elaborate," Valgair said. "We won't be the ones wiping them out, or that's how we'll make it look like. We're going to frame someone." "Who?" Kate asked. Valgair flashed a wicked smile. "I know a gang of criminals who don't like Newman much due to some shared history. Some members left that gang for Newman and there was a bit of a conflict a year or two back. The gang is situated a bit far from Borea, but the Borea branch is the only sizable branch close to them, so it'll be somewhat believable, and that's all we need." Kate licked her lips as the ends of her lips started to curve up. "And then that gang will be destroyed by Newman. It'll be two birds with one stone." "Ha, this might work." Aurelius opened his mouth again. "Is the gang strong enough to possibly wipe out a Newman branch?" "I think it's possible," Valgair said. "And it's not like Newman will think so hard about that if they find evidence." "About that, what evidence will we plant for it to be believable? How will we frame them?" Kate asked. Not sure. I thought, we could maybe kill a member or two of the gang and leave them at the site, where we wipe them out. They had these symbols on their outfit the last time I checked, so that'll do." "Won't they figure out that the corpses predate the assault?" Kate asked. "Oh, right, we'll have to transport it and all. Or not. Haha, we'll just kidnap a guy or two and kill them before we wipe the branch out." Kate nodded slowly in realization. "I'm happy we chose to make you a part of this." Valgair chuckled at the compliment. "Thanks. Your words really warm my heart." Kate and Balfair then looked at the brooding Aurelius. It was understandable that the plan bothered him. He then opened his mouth, and something unexpected came out. "We'll need time. If we do it right away and Newman gets suspicious, they could easily figure out that it was us. Let's give it time before we do it." Valgair nodded. "Oh yeah, good point. But how much time? Is 1 month good? Half a year?" Aurelius said without hesitation. Valgisar threw his arms out. "Half a year? That's too much. Where will you be for all that time? There's no way you won't be noticed in Request for half a year." "I'm going back to the Thropes. Not far from the border," Aurelius said solemnly, unaffected by Valgair's emotions. "I need practice. I need to get stronger. I need to be alone." No, Cade said, I'll come with you. You need me to teach you. No, I don't. You've taught me enough. I need to practice by myself. I can't focus purely on myself if you're with me. Aurelius objected firmly. Besides, you need to further our plan. Put those thousands of gold to good use. You should start building connections that can help us fight Newman's influence. You should also help the people. Donate to legitimate charities and make a name you can use in the future to get the support of the people. Kate opened her mouth, but closed it before any words came out. I think it's a good idea, Valgaire voiced his support. I'll do further research on how we will make our plan work while Cade furthers the plan, and you get stronger. It is decided, then, Aurelius said, narrowing his eyes before speaking with nothing but determination in his voice. In half a year, we will meet again and begin the annihilation of Newman. Chapter 26. Beautiful Tones. He's been gone for longer than expected, Gadriel remarked as he walked down the city streets of the capital with Sheridan by his side. It was getting late, and the streets were starting to empty. Well, he is supposed to still be a teenager. He needs time to train. If you're right and think he will try to wipe out the Newman branch of Borea, he won't just need to be, not the obvious suspect, but also strong enough to do it, Sheridan commented. Gadriel looked up at the cloudless, light blue sky. Oh, he's strong enough. He's the son of Ares. And he has companions as well. Are you really sure he's who you think he is? Yeah, I'm sure. The bounty description was understandably wrong about his age. Also, nobody except the royals of the great Zalfarian Empire has golden hair, so it's rather obvious that it's him. Nobody who's a part of the most prestigious bloodline in the world would be stealing from insignificant noble houses if they weren't the secret love child of the hero of Zalfari. Sheridan snorted. Well, if he's so strong, why is he hiding? Gadriel moved his eyes around as he answered, he's preparing for something bigger. I'm just not quite sure what that is. You think he could be preparing to start a war against Newman? Gadriel yawned. Could be. Then something grabbed his leg. He pulled away in an instant with a murderous look in his eyes. It was just a homeless man sitting in a lotus position. Hey, you've got some nice clothes. There, young'un, the vagabond blathered. Got some spare change? Gadriel put a hand up to stop Sheridan from disappearing the man. What do you plan to do with the money I give you? Be honest, Gadriel said. The vagabond laughed hoarsely, his fingers going through his scruffy beard. I'll buy me some ale. Gadriel revealed a wide smile and put a hand on Sheridan's shoulder. Could you go get us some alcohol, dear? The best money can buy. Sheridan snorted once again, and in the next moment, she was gone. Gadriel heaved a sigh and went to sit down next to the vagabond, who was rubbing his eyes. He was probably wondering if he actually just saw the purple-haired woman disappear. I appreciate it, young'un, the vagabond said. You're a real blessing. Gadriel laughed. A blessing, Don't hear that often. Oh, I'm sure you do. You're one generous boy. Gadriel swung his head from side to side. I give and I take. Nothing noble or ignoble about it, the way I see it. A philosopher you are, the vagabond said with a cough. Gadriel dug the single most important bronze coin out of his pocket and started fiddling with it. I hear that a lot these days. Wouldn't have expected, lookin' at her fancy self. Gadriel looked down. He was just wearing some slacks and a white shirt. He didn't have his golden earrings on, either. What do you mean? Gadriel asked the vagabond to elaborate. I've heard philosophers to be the live in a barrel without clothes type. Sinful earthly possessions and all that. Oh, yeah, I've heard about a guy like that, too. His name started with AD, I believe. You, him, me. The vagabond burst into laughter or a coughing fit. Gadriel couldn't really tell. He wouldn't have been surprised if the man dropped dead right then. No, I'm not him, the vagabond said. Oh, yeah, you're missing the barrel, Gadriel pondered with his hand on his chin. Again, the vagabond laughed. Gadriel was a pretty funny guy in his own opinion, but the vagabond was exaggerating. I'm not this way because of thoughts, but the lack of thoughts, young'un. Makes sense, Gadriel said and turned to face the direction where Sheridan had gone. Ah, there comes our alcohol. Gadriel lifted his hand, and in the next moment, there was a fine bottle of whiskey in it. Thank you, Gadriel said before removing the lid of the bottle. He then poured the whiskey into his hand, where two fine glasses made of pure essence appeared in an instant. He then handed one glass to the vagabond and handed the whiskey back to Sheridan, who sat in front of him and the vagabond, forming a triangle. You're a magician, the vagabond said with a shaky voice. I dabble, Gadriel said with a chuckle. Sheridan materialized her own glass and poured out some whiskey. What are we drinking to? To alcoholism, the vagabond suggested. To honesty, Gadriel said with a smile. To alcoholism and honesty, it is, Sheridan said, raising her glass. Cheers, the vagabond said. Gadriel then proceeded to wordlessly down the glass. What followed was a coughing streak that lasted for about a minute. Sheridan watched with a smile, and when it finally ended, she said, "You're supposed to sip that." "Oh, thanks for the heads up," Gadriel said, wiping his mouth. "You don't drink much, do you, young'un?" "Not really, no, there's no thrill in it for me." "You one strange fella, that he is," Sheridan commented. "You married?" the vagabond asked. "Kind of," Sheridan responded. "We spend our days in each other's company, even though we mostly hate each other. We also continue to stay together for some inexplicable reason. What is marriage if not that?" Gadriel laughed and pointed his thumb at Sheridan. "She's my bodyguard. I'm in a dangerous profession, and despite my magician skills, I need protection." "How'd you meet?" "My former boss paid her to assassinate me," Gadriel said. "I talked her out of it with my silver tongue, of course." Gadriel stuck his tongue out and pointed to it. The vagabond leaned closer and squinted. Gadriel put his tongue back in his mouth and finished his story. "She's been under my employment ever since." The vagabond ran his fingers through his scruffy beard with narrowed eyes. "I didn't see no silver on her tongue." Gadriel rubbed his forehead. "It's an idiom. It means I'm good at talking." "You talk, and she fights?" the vagabond asked and turned to Sheridan. "You're the man of the house, then," the vagabond said, sipping his whiskey for the first time. Sheridan flexed and pecked her biceps one at a time. The vagabond's eyes went wide. Sheridan probably thought he was impressed with her non-existent muscles, but quickly realized it was the whiskey. "Good alcohol?" Gadriel asked. "You kidding?" the vagabond said. "It's like God himself pissed into my cup." Gadriel laughed. "Glad you like it." "I love it," the vagabond declared for all to hear. "If you can afford this, no sweat. I don't get why you don't drink it all the time." "Probably so that he won't turn into you." Sheridan laughed on her turn. "As I said, alcohol really doesn't bring me joy," Gadriel explained. "Then what do you live for?" the vagabond asked. "I made a promise when I was young," Gadriel answered. He could see Sheridan roll her eyes. "You're still young," the vagabond said. "Younger," Gadriel specified and poured more whiskey. "Well, what was this promise?" Gadriel leaned closer with a serious expression. "That's none of your business." Then the sound of a guitar being played in the distance hit Gadriel's ears. Immediately, Gadriel exploded with joy. He grinned at the man and handed him the whiskey. "Here, you can have the rest. I got to go." "Ah, right, thank you," the vagabond said with a startled but respectful nod. Gadriel jumped to his feet, stopping the materialization of the cups, and ran off. Sheridan followed. They soon came up to a man about Gadriel's age. He wasn't a beggar by any means. He looked like a university student. "What are you doing out here?" Gadriel asked. The young man looked up and stopped playing. I'm playing the guitar." "Really? That's crazy," Gadriel said and extended his hand. "Give it here." "Huh, what do you mean? Your guitar. Give me your guitar." "What? No, come on, give it. I won't steal it, I promise." "You know, I've never broken a promise in my whole life," Gadriel said, but seeing as the young man was still holding onto his guitar, he added a little incentive. He took a 10 gold banknote out of his pocket and handed it to the young man. "Here, I'm buying the guitar." "Are you serious?" "Ah, here, take it." The young man handed the guitar over after getting the banknote in his hands. "Why did you want the guitar?" Gadriel looked at the young man like he was an idiot. "To play a song, of course." He then sat down and began. First, he warmed up a little by moving his fingers through the strings and letting the tunes climb. When he was done warming up, he left silence linger for a moment before beautiful tunes emerged into reality. It started high and went low before climbing peacefully into a metaphorical flight of stairs that it glided back and forth in before spinning around and spreading out like a blooming flower. The last 10 seconds of the music were strictly major. Then it all ended in a minor tone. However, at that point, the minor tone didn't sound so sad. It was fitting, perfect. The song lasted a couple of minutes, but by the time Gadriel finished playing, tens of people had gathered around to listen. Gadriel looked at the guitar with an expression that maybe looked like it had substance, but really it was empty. Then he lifted his head, and a round of applause resounded. "That was beautiful," the young man said in awe. "Not as beautiful as it once was," Gadriel said without turning his gaze. He stood up with a charming smile and bowed to the audience before handing the guitar back to the young man. "Didn't you buy it?" the young man asked. "I did, and now I'm donating it back to you," he said, letting go of the guitar and walking away into the crowd. Chapter 27. Half motionless. The final step was missing. Aurelius tried to follow through, but it was just out of his reach. He couldn't complete the motionless magic. Well, at least he now had Balgair's mini supply technique down. The guy was a surprisingly good teacher and had left instructions for Aurelius in his notebook before they separated. He stood up and looked down from the cliff he had sat on. He took his bag off the ground and dug out his notebook. He opened it and took hold of the pen that was attached to it. Then he crossed another number out of the chart he had made. 42. It was the 42nd day that he was in the Thropes. It had been about 2 months since he learned about motionless magic and materialization from Cade. Practicing wasn't going so well. He did still have 138 days left in the Thropes. During that time, he needed to learn how to use motionless magic with reinforcement and maybe with muscular enhancement as well. In addition, he wanted to be able to make a stable blade and platform with materialization before he left. Those two were necessary for him to learn, and they were supposed to be fairly simple. He just hadn't had much time to practice them yet. He scrolled through the notebook thoughtlessly. Something caught his eye. Instinct. The word instinct. A quote from Gabriel again. There was probably more Gabriel than Aurelius in the notebook. Well, it was given to him by Gabriel, so it made some sense. Aurelius didn't have much on his mind and decided to just read the text. "You have good instincts like your father. You know, he trained all of us in the elite troop. He also had a hand in the selection process for the elite troop. I once heard someone ask him a question about how he managed to pick out such talented individuals. He answered that it was through instinct. Apparently, he just looked at us with those surgeon's eyes and saw straight away the potential we had, or, in other words, the danger we posed. No matter the strength, there are secrets in the mind that decide our battles. People fall into two categories: hunters and prey. You might think that all soldiers are hunters, but that's not necessarily true. Some soldiers should be civilians, and some civilians should be hunters. There are strong prey as well as weak hunters." Aurelius rubbed his eyes and skipped over some text. "So be aware of the instincts you have and control them instead of letting them control you. Instincts can help to defend against a surprise attack, but they can also lead to accidentally hurting someone." Aurelius exhaled, closed the notebook and put it back into his bag. Then he walked closer to the cliff. It was a fine place to practice. There was a straight down drop off the cliff that stretched tens of meters. Aurelius raised his gaze. Ahead, there was nothing but forest. It went as far as the eye could see, all the way to the tiny spot on the horizon where the sun was rising. It would be a beautiful day. Aurelius smiled, stood up straight, and took one more step to the pointy edge of the cliff. Then the rock beneath his feet broke loose. It slid down diagonally, so quickly that Aurelius couldn't catch himself and was just bumped by the cliff, falling backward onto the ground. Aurelius grasped at air with his mouth open in a silent scream before he realized he'd have to brace for the fall. He maneuvered his body in the air to face the ground, which was closer than he had expected. In a panic, he brought his arms forth, but before he could interlock his hands, the reinforcement was already complete. Aurelius tumbled through leaves and branches before he made it to the ground. It was an uncomfortable experience. He was more worried about his clothes, but they were the ones he had bought with Balgair, and Balgair really seemed to know quality clothes. Perhaps he helped Aurelius only to waste Cade's money, but that was beside the point. When he came to the ground and dusted off his clothes, he processed what he had just experienced. He wasn't sure if it had just happened or not. Did he complete the reinforcement motionlessly or not? His hands had been interlocked, but did it happen before that, or did he just imagine it? Then he relaxed, closed his eyes, and tried again. He imagined performing the setup, and fooled his senses enough to get the essence flowing, but he couldn't quite get the essence to realize what it was supposed to do. If speaking in terms of giving orders, Aurelius stumbled over his words enough so that the essence didn't know what he was trying to say. Aurelius then began to walk toward the cliff. When he was right under the place he had fallen from, he enhanced his whole body briefly. He jumped and grabbed onto cavities in the cliff and proceeded to repeat the process until he made it to the top. He then situated his bag a bit farther from the edge. His body could take the fall, but he wasn't sure if the same applied to his belongings. After putting his bag down, he went to sit at the edge of the cliff again. That was when a screeching sound resounded in his ears. His body shook, and a memory emerged. The cursed beast rammed into him before he could interlock his fingers, but it was already done. His reinforcement had already kicked in. Aurelius' eyes went wide as a large bird flew overhead. It was the same then. What I did just now. I did it out of instinct back then. That word, instinct, it really was powerful. It had made something otherwise impossible for him at that time into something he could grasp in the heat of the moment without fundamental understanding. He had to learn how to control it, like Gabriel said. Then he could go above and beyond his imagination. Aurelius looked at his arms and quickly neared them, intending to interlock them, but stopping before they could touch. He closed his eyes and carried the setup further in his mind. He imagined the sensation of his hands touching, interlocking, and squeezing. Then his muscles suddenly burst with energy and hugged his bones, which felt like diamonds inserted into his body. He opened his eyes with possibly the widest smile he'd ever had. It's half-motionless magic. That shouldn't be possible, should it? It mixed all the fundamentals up. The beginning movement of the setup that the body recognizes spurs the essence flow, giving the necessary boost for the rest to be carried out in the mind. Aurelius laughed like a maniac. He truly was only one step from the real thing. It wouldn't be long before he would grasp true motionlessness. And when the half-year was up, he would be able to utilize it in battle. On the dawn of the 44th day, in a large town dedicated to the poor but not so poor as well as the rich but not so rich, Balgair sat on the top of a gray apartment building made out of uneven bricks. He hung his feet off the ledge as he ashed his cigarette onto the streets below, where people were starting to go to work. The town was called Westcaster. There was really nothing special about it, really. Except for the fact that there was no Newman branch there or even close to there. And Newman branches were all over. They were everywhere. Everybody and their grandpa probably walked by a Newman member on a daily basis. Now there were only about 10 branches of Newman that had real power. The kind you could contend against an army or destroy a city with. However, small branches with 15 or so members were in every single place where crime happened. Which means absolutely every place that more than one human resides in. All places except this little shit called Westcaster. The place where Balgair spent his early teenage years, and the home to the single gang of criminals that had gone against Newman and survived. Now, they would be destroyed eventually in the future, but Balgair was just going to move that eventuality up on the timeline. Balgair smiled as he swung his feet. I wonder, Lane, do you believe in fate? I'm starting to. Balgair took his cigarette and shoved it head first into the pile that lay next to him that contained somewhere between 5 and 10 cigarettes. Who kept count? He looked up, his smile growing as the sun illuminated all below it. You really should have killed me. No, no, no. You knew I would come back. You wished I would. Well, I'm here now. And you will regret. Chapter 28. The Evaporation Squadron. Right on time as always, Gadriel said with a brief raise of a hand as the door to the main hall of his castle opened and 20 or so men walked in. The men seemed to all be in the 30 to 50 age range, and each one carried the air of a veteran. They wore tidy black uniforms that had a target circle right above their hearts. Thank you for allowing us this visit, the man at the head of the group said with a nod. Gadriel crossed his legs as he sat on the throne of gold and silver that was set on an elevated platform at the end of the room. Of course. Now what can I do for you, Easier? Easier was one of the youngest in the entire troop, but his presence weighed the most out of anyone in the troop by far. He had short and neat black hair as well as a prominent jawline, and his dark skin matched his eyes to a T. Oh, I expect you knew what it was I wanted before I even requested to see you. Gadriel leaned his cheek into his palm and smiled faintly. Have I ever told you how fitting I think your name is? Easier. It's so sharp, as are you. Easier lowered his chin but kept his dark gaze on Gadriel. He looked at Gadriel's forehead like he was ready to put a spike through it. Sheridan appeared by Gadriel's side that second. Next 5 figures, wearing black masks and hoods, came out of hiding. They were called the 5 Shadows. A lazy name, in Gadriel's humble opinion, but they were of the utmost competence. They situated themselves in front of the stairs that led up to the throne's platform, standing between Easier and Gadriel. Gadriel stood up and raised his hands. I apologize for my personality. I should take this more seriously. I don't want to fight you, nor do I want to interfere with your plans, Easier as he slowly made his way forward, leaving his troops behind. But you owe me a debt, Gadriel. I suppose it is time for you to pay. Gadriel made his way down, but the leader of the 5 Shadows stopped between him and Easier. Gadriel tapped on his shoulder. Move, he said, and the masked man peered into his eyes for a moment before peering into those of Easier and stepping back. Gadriel and Easier stepped forward, and stood within hand's reach of one another. Easier was a head taller and had a lean but muscular frame with round shoulders that made Gadriel look somewhat like a child. You know, you could kill me here and now, and just get what you want without problems, Gadriel said, poking the target circle symbol on Easier's chest. Easier raised his chin and breathed deeply. Could I, or would you do to me what you did to William? But you're stronger than William, Gadriel said, leaning his head back a bit. And William was stronger than you. That doesn't change what I saw that day, Easier said, trying to meet Gadriel's eyes. Gadriel, however, was too busy aiming his silver eyes elsewhere, looking around without a care in the world. Finally, he turned to Easier and smiled as he looked into his dark eyes. Your heart seems to be beating faster than usual. Gadriel tilted his head, feigning worry. Have you been smoking? Easier pursed his lips. He clearly didn't want to be in contact with Gadriel. But he wanted something so much that he had to come. Gadriel respected that. Gadriel's expression turned serious. Your words hold true. I do owe you. However, I have my own plans for the kid. Easier gritted his teeth. This is all I want from you. You can't deny me. Gadriel raised his brows. I can't. Sure, I can, and I am doing so at this very moment, he said, mockery lacing his words. Easier's hands squeezed into fists. In the same, Sheridan was about to launch. Gadriel put out a hand, though, and Sheridan relaxed. Then Gadriel laid his hand on Easier's shoulder briefly. Don't worry, friend, I will fit you into my plans. I have to be the one who kills him, Easier demanded. And I will give you the opportunity to do so. I just won't give it now. When it is time, Gadriel said with a slow nod. I won't wait more than a year. It is up to me how long you wait, Gadriel said, sharpening his gaze. Go after him before I give you permission, and I will have your evaporation squadron slaughtered before you even catch a glimpse of golden hair. Easier swallowed and exhaled. Then he extended his hand. Gadriel smiled and grasped his hand tightly. I'm glad we could come to an agreement. Also, don't worry about the kid dying before you get to him. Just worry about what you'll do once you get to him. Easier freed himself of Gadriel's grasp. Why are you giving him time? Easier continued with an annoyed question. I thought we were done here already. Gadriel thought as he cracked his neck a little to soothe himself. Then he sharpened his gaze. Why are you so hungry to kill an immature brat? Gadriel asked in return. Seek him out now, and you'll deal with him, no problem. Is that what you want? Will it bring glory to your father's memory if you kill the teenage son of Ares? Easier sealed his lips and looked down. Gadriel looked down as well, an exaggeratedly baffled look on his face. What? There's no golden hair strand down there. Look at me and answer the question. Look at me. Easier looked up and stepped closer, glaring straight into Gadriel's eyes as he ground his teeth. Gadriel didn't back away and instead leaned his head a bit forward, meeting Easier's sharp gaze with a pair of calm, expectant eyes. He then articulated his question again. Do you think it is better to kill him when he's a pathetic imitation of his father, or when he's grasped his potential? That could take decades. Easier snapped. Gadriel shook his head while keeping his eyes steady. It won't. I'll make sure of that. You have my word. Easier breathed, managing to calm himself a little. That's right. Breathe and think. I am giving you an ample opportunity for revenge, and you just whine. I promise to deliver you a battle that'll honor your father, so thank me, shake my hand, and get out. After the meeting was over, the 5 shadows were tasked with escorting the evaporation squadron. As soon as they made it out of the hall and the door closed behind them, the leader of the shadows took his mask off, revealing a pale face and a head of blonde hair. He then looked at Easier who was beside him, and blinked his deep green eyes a few times. Good to see you, Easier. Easier nodded at the man and kept walking. Come on, give your old pal even a few words. Why did you leave the evaporation squadron to work for that guy, Leonardo? You know why, Leonardo answered. I always wanted to lead, but ended up just being a co-leader. Then Gadriel offered me a leading position, and he didn't ask you first. He deliberately didn't ask me first. Leonardo nodded. Probably. The guy probably figured out my exact thinking process after our first meeting. He knew exactly what I wanted. And you like that about him? I love that about him. He always puts on a show. I've never had as much excitement in my life as I've had while working under him. That's because he's reckless. What is recklessness to normal people is certainty to geniuses. And he's a genius among geniuses. Easier snorted and shook his head. Leonardo shrugged. Say what you want, but you know it's true. He's one of a kind. I've never seen anyone rag on you like that. It was hilarious. Shut up. Easier spat with narrow eyes. You were tense as hell the whole time. No, I wasn't. I knew you wouldn't touch him. Yeah, right. You would have stopped me if I did. Sheridan would have. Easier tilted his head slightly. I've seen her fight. She's just really fast. I could handle her. She may not be particularly strong, but she can decapitate you before you realize that she's in the same space as you. There's no chance you could handle her, Leonardo said with a laugh before turning to Easier as they made it to the gate. It was good to see you. And don't worry, Gadriel always keeps his promises. You will get your chance. You have my word on that as well. Easier nodded and shook Leonardo's hand. Thank you, I'll make the most of that chance. Leonardo smiled. I know you will. Be patient. I would hate to have to kill you. You think you'd be able to? I don't know, but if Gadriel wanted you dead, you'd die for sure. You bore witness to his overtaking, the same as I did. You know what he's capable of. Easier sighed. He didn't want to remember that time. It was all chaos for everyone except for one person. And the way it ended. The duel. It was a sight from which one wanted to look away but couldn't, for it was the truth. The truth presented by the devil himself. Chapter 29. Revelation. At sundown, the door to Aaliyah's home opened, and a woman in a thin black trench coat walked in. The woman had ash-brown hair that stopped at the middle of her neck and was cut into bangs on the front. Cade. Someone poked her head out of the kitchen. Cade took her shoes off before turning her head to the right and nodding. Aaliyah, good to see you. You've grown your hair. Cade rubbed some of the lower parts of her hair. Think it looks fine. It looks great. How did you grow it so fast? Have you checked your calendar? It's been 3 months. You've been gone for that long. Aaliyah scratched her head. Seems have been drowning in my work. She waved her hand. Well, don't just stand there. I'll make some tea. Cade took her trench coat off and laid it on the railing beside the stairs before entering the kitchen, where Aaliyah lit a few candles. How long do you plan on growing your hair? Is that all you have to ask after 3 months? Aaliyah looked at Cade with her mouth open as if insulted to her core. I'm making small talk. What do you want me to ask? Hey, Cade, how's the killin'? You done a lot of killin' lately. Aaliyah demonstrated a few serious questions with a deep voice. Ha ha, Cade said monotonously as she sat down with an exasperated sigh. You know my personality is more than just killing, right? Aaliyah put a spoon in her mouth while she worked on the tea. Is it now? News to me. TCH. Cade shook her head. I'm not going to grow my hair, just so you know. I'm cutting it when Aurelius gets back. Aaliyah put a spoonful of something into the teapot and froze. Cade, she said, turning to Cade while seemingly on the verge of ripping her eyes out, you're going to be single forever. Cade sighed. So be it. I can't fight with long hair. It limits my vision and will probably get me killed. At least you won't die a virgin, Aaliyah said with a shrug. All I'm saying. Yeah, well, fuck it. Oh, come on. Aaliyah took a seat at the table. I know you want that sexy golden lion. Cade inhaled deeply before a light blue dagger appeared in her hand. She then spun it in her fingers like the greatest circus performer in history before pointing it at Aaliyah. I know we're best friends and all, but I will carve out your vocal cords if the words, sexy golden lion, even slip out of that hole in your face ever again. Aaliyah burst into a fit of laughter, almost falling from her chair. I'm sorry, I went too far, but you do like him, right? Cade continued fiddling with the knife in her hand. He's 3 years younger than me. Doesn't know really anything about really anything and has the linguistic skills of a 7-year-old. And he killed the enhancer-boosted head guard of the Borlo family by shoving his hand through him, at 16. He's just obsessed with essence. That's really the only redeeming quality he has when it comes to living in this world of ours. But you'd like for him to be obsessed with. Cade pointed the knife at Aaliyah and she quieted down. For a while. So what do you know about him? You talked a lot while traveling together, right? As I said, he's obsessed with essence. When we talked, it was about motionless magic, materialization, and really nothing else. Geez, must have been fun. Aaliyah seemed to remember something and put up a finger. Oh, but he must have freaked out after finding out you were a girl all along, right? Cade pursed her lips and sighed. Not really, no, he just wanted to talk about essence, Cade explained. Aaliyah's mouth went wide before she burst into laughter. She laughed and looked at Cade's serious expression before laughing some more. Just your luck. Eventually, Cade just shrugged. Still, it was more fun than with the mercenaries, for sure. Having to watch those animals, knowing I shouldn't kill them yet, was probably the least fun I've had during my entire life. Why did you go undercover, then? I told you it was stupid. You should have just gone and established your dominance, Aaliyah said, puffing out her chest with a comical expression. Doesn't work. Not on mercenaries, at least. I could kill the entire troop, and the last one alive still wouldn't admit to being inferior to a woman, Kate said with a light laugh. The prehistoric days without essence seem to be ingrained so deeply into their brains that it has become a permanent part of their personalities. Can't believe some women actually consented to produce more people into this world with the ancestors of those people. Aaliyah cast his gaze down. Probably didn't. Kate exhaled through her nose. Right, well, those people are gone now. Good, Aaliyah said and went to check the tea. But do you really not know anything about that companion of yours? Kate scratched her head. Well, Balgair said something about him being a royal. But Aurelius denied that. Aaliyah took a few mugs out of a cabinet and started pouring the tea. Oh, I've heard something similar. Apparently, in the Great Zalfarian Empire, everyone in the royal family has golden hair and isn't able to grow facial hair. And that goes for everyone with the same blood. Like the genes are so dominant that no matter who your other parent is, you'll have golden hair and blue eyes. A bunch of bullshit if you ask me, she said, bringing 2 cups of tea to the table. Kate let the knife disappear and grasped the handle of her mug. Huh, why does everybody suddenly know so much about Zalfari? I literally didn't even know about the whole country for most of my life. Probably because of the war, Aaliyah answered as she sipped her tea. You know, Zalfari was the first country that managed to stop the conqueror of the West. And Zalfari is smaller than Lundkirk. Do you know how insane that is? The conqueror of the West is the greatest general in history, and Zalfari managed to negotiate a temporary truce. Kate sipped her tea and asked, but wasn't it because of internal issues? Really, all she knew about Zalfari was that it was on the other side of the ocean, and they were about to lose a war against the conqueror of the West. Well, kind of, but that was only after 10,000 of the best soldiers in Lundkirk were slaughtered. What? Yeah, they all died in some battle, and Lundkirk's military took a massive hit that caused all kinds of problems. There were attempted revolutions and stuff, so the conqueror of the West had to stop the war for a while. How did they die? They say the god of war came down from the heavens to fight for Zalfari. Kate's upper lip curled. You're joking, right? No, that's actually what they say. A god came down from the heavens. That's your explanation? Well, the more realistic explanation is that some soldier named Ares killed all of them, and because he died, the Zalfarians couldn't attack Lundkirk. One man killed 10,000. You expect me to believe that? More believable than the god of war story, in my opinion. Kate swallowed a mouthful of tea and burped. Do Zalfarians have anything else than myths? Probably not. Also, guess what? Rumor has it that Ares, the soldier, not the mythological god, was the son of the emperor and the greatest female soldier in Zalfari. What's next? The conqueror of the West is the son of the best board game strategist in the world. Aaliyah laughed at her own poor jokes as Kate's mind swirled with thoughts. Golden-haired, Zalfarian royal, son of the emperor, extremely talented, had a capable teacher in the Thropes. Who is the strongest person in history, you know? Aurelius asked. Balgair joined immediately after hearing about his story. You'd find out something interesting if you read a book, Balgair said. Kate's hand went loose, and her mug dropped. It clanked against the table before jumping onto the floor and shattering into a million pieces, letting the remaining tea flow all over the ground. Kate buried her face in her hands. I'm an idiot. Kate, what's wrong? Aaliyah asked, startled by the mug shattering. Aurelius, Kate said as she exasperatedly sat up straight and put her gaze on the roof, he's the son of Ares. Chapter 30. A New Year. It was getting colder. The winter in the south was mild when compared to the ones Aurelius was used to, though. It snowed a little on some days, but not enough to even cover the ground fully. It was Aurelius' 153rd day in the Thropes. More importantly than that, though, was that a new year had begun and Aurelius had become 17 years old. And, as per tradition, he spent the whole day writing. He listed the things he had done, highlighting the parts he was proud of and the parts that brought him shame. Usually, those two were balanced, and so were they this year as well. He had killed a man, but he had learned about motionless magic and now had a firm grasp on it. He had stolen a fortune from a man he didn't know, but he had made new friends, and he thought he'd had a positive effect on Balgair. Furthermore, he had also left his mother without a word, but he had started a plan that would eventually help millions. He didn't want to do anything bad, but it was the price he had to pay. He could do no good deeds if he was too afraid of doing some bad. That was what he had learned. No more being depressed over stupid stuff. He had to be efficient. In order to help, he had to sacrifice parts of himself. But that was what being a hero meant. Aurelius sat in the air on a light blue ethereal box that blocked out wind. And gave him calm. No sound made it through. It was that soundproof feature that the cursed beast had used against him. Kate had said it was possible to let sound through if one was a good enough manipulator. You really could do anything with materialization. Aurelius closed his eyes and concentrated. Then reinforcement snapped on. Next, he put his focus on muscular enhancement. Then his senses. He opened his eyes with reinforcement, double enhancement, and materialization all at the same time. He could feel the box shaking. He could maintain it all for maybe 30 seconds if he stayed still and concentrated. If he pushed through that amount of time, it would all fall apart, and he may fall without managing to reinforce in time. The fact that Kate could do all of it while fighting and keep it up for multiple minutes was beyond amazing. She really was something. Aurelius smiled and exhaled before relaxing. In the same, reinforcement and both enhancements ended their functions. Motionless magic still felt foreign. He had been using setups for years, but now they were wholly irrelevant. It was like an accessory had been stolen. Like a part of his life was gone. But another part had come to replace it. He had to remember that. A new part of his life had begun. That fact had finally sunk in. He no longer had family around him. Only his companions. He wasn't bound to them by blood. In a sense, he was the most alone he had ever been. But that didn't have to be a bad thing. He could develop much faster alone. And that is what he would do. He would evolve. The 180th day had come, and Aurelius left the Thropes. He would probably not return to the Thropes again for a long time. On his travels, he wore a piece of black cloth wrapped around his head and a straw hat on top of it, which he traded for 1 silver coin. It was a good deal, in his opinion. It took him longer than expected to find Aaliyah's home by himself. He wasn't the best at reading maps or taking directional instructions, so he was used to kind of just following Kate around. She always seemed to know where she was going. When he finally found Aaliyah's house, he walked up to it and was about to knock when the door opened and Kate showed herself. Her hair was long. It went all the way to her shoulders, and those short, clipped hairs on her forehead somehow seemed to accentuate her soft features. Balgair hadn't changed a bit, though. He poked his head from behind Kate before she got a word out and practically yelled, "You see that, Goldilocks? Boy-looking girl is girl-looking girl now. She actually looks good, too. I wouldn't believe it if she wasn't standing right in front of me." Kate's eyes narrowed. "You're late." It seemed she hadn't enjoyed her time alone with Balgair. Aurelius adjusted his hat with a wide smile. "It's good to see you, Kate." He put a hand up and looked at Balgair. "And you, Balgair." Kate didn't move out of the way. "Can I come in?" Kate sighed and walked away from the door, heading straight to the kitchen. "There's food." "What, food?" Aurelius asked as he removed his shoes. "Potatoes and steak." "What steak?" "I don't know," Kate said exasperatedly. "Eat or don't eat. I don't care." Aurelius looked at Balgair with a worried look. This wasn't just Kate's regular attitude. Something was wrong. Was she mad that he didn't take her with him? He took off the cloth wrapped around his head, prompting a stifled laugh from Balgair. "You really need a haircut, man. That's kind of hard these days," Aurelius said, his face twisted with a hint of comedy. "I can cut it if you want to," Balgair offered with a hand out. "I cut my own hair." "Ah, thanks," Aurelius said with a brief smile before turning to go into the kitchen. "Oh, about her." Balgair leaned on the handrail next to the stairs and nodded towards the kitchen. "She's mad you didn't tell her who you are." "Who I am? What?" Balgair's eyebrows went up as he nodded. We both know you're the son of Ares." Aurelius' face dropped. "How long have we known?" Balgair finished for him. "Me." He pointed at himself. "I realized on the day we met." Then he pointed to the kitchen. "Slowpoke over there realized while you were gone." Aurelius rubbed his forehead and walked into the kitchen. He sat down on the kitchen table, where Cade was shoveling food into her mouth. "Cade, I'm sorry. When I was young, Gabriel told me I shouldn't tell anyone. It was better if nobody knew." Cade looked up with a mouth full of food and chewed for a good half a minute before saying, "I'm not mad you didn't tell me." He looked at Balgair who stood, leaning on the wall of the kitchen entrance. "I'm mad I didn't realize it when this prick did." Aurelius looked at both of them before bursting into laughter. You're as lively as ever, Kate remarked. Sorry, Aurelius said, wiping at his nose. I just missed you guys. They shared a meal while sharing their experiences. Aurelius told them about his discoveries, like half-motionless magic and other advancements of his. Kate talked about how she spread the gold to poor communities all over Mercrest in untraceable amounts. Apparently, she had done it under the name Deity. When asked about the name, Kate just rambled on about some stuff Aurelius didn't quite comprehend. The main point was that they needed a mythical presence that the people would cling on to. That was how they could make their existence known to the powers in Mercrest that were against Newman. Such was the way they intended on altering the power balance of the entire country. Balgair didn't seem to be impressed. Then it was his turn to share. The room got more serious. You know the Borea branch's location? Aurelius asked. Balgair nodded. Yeah, it's hidden in a nightclub. How will we get there unnoticed? Kate asked. We could just kick a wall down. Or then we go in at daytime because, you know, it's a nightclub. Kate scratched her cheek. You sure we'll get that to work? Balgair waved a hand. Just trust me, I'll get it to work. My ass is on the line the same as yours. Kate gave a mini shrug mixed with a nod and shifted the topic of conversation. So about the gang of criminals, you figured out their current patterns and made up a plan. Balgair leaned his head back slightly. I've got things figured out, don't worry. How will we do it? Aurelius asked, despite Balgair's notion. Balgair sighed. The gang takes hostages once in a while, so a few of them stay behind to guard them during nights. We'll have to wait for a chance that way. Can't we just grab them in the streets? Kate asked. A lot easier that way. Well, if we do it like that, we'll leave more evidence or witnesses that could nullify our framing efforts. Balgair raised a finger. But if we do it in their base, there will be no one to see, and they will erase the evidence for us. All right, Kate said, putting her hand on the table before standing up. That's enough detail for now. Let's all go to sleep now. We depart tomorrow morning. Aurelius smiled, happy to sleep in a familiar bed again and excited at the prospect of getting the bounty off his head. Balgair, on the other hand, had a grin on his face as he twirled and looked at his glass, his eyes shaded. Then he raised the glass and said, to Westcaster.